Welcome to the Event Show Live, everyone. Thank you for joining us. A big thanks to those that are tuning in again. We thank you for your support for the show, and a big thanks to those that are joining us for the first time. It's really great to have you all here today. The purpose of this show is to bring us together as event people, hear from some leaders from our industry, and share some of the challenges we're currently going through, and of course some of the opportunities that are emerging, and hopefully giving you some things that you can walk away with and use in your work. We have another brilliant group of industry leaders join us today. The theme for today's show is about hearing from service providers within our industry, which represents such a core part of the event world. And we look forward to hearing their perspectives on what we're currently going through. And we'll go to them pretty much straight away. For those of you that haven't joined before, my name is Andrew O'Loughlin. I'm obviously the host, and I've been working in events for many years. I ran an event agency for 10 years and now out helping event teams design and rebuild their events, taking a experienced design approach as an advisor, running some workshops and doing some coaching, basically helping event teams create more successful events and helping event people navigate their way through this phase. And speaking of successful event people and leaders, I would like to introduce our panel today. So first up, I will introduce Sam Goodwin. Sam is Managing Director at CSM Sport Entertainment in Australia. Morning, Sam.
Morning.
Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And likewise, Sophie Hamdorf. Sophie is Brand and Marketing Advisor, leading the way for many clients at Register Now. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show. And also Dave Smith. Dave is Assistant Project Director for APP and Site Manager for the Formula One Australian Grand Prix. So fantastic to have you on the show, Dave, to hear from your experiences. Welcome.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you all on. And I should say before we get underway, please do feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box or chat in the chat box. It's really good for us to hear what's on your minds and what you want to hear about today. So please do encourage you to drop those in as we go, and we'll certainly endeavour to get to as many questions as we can. But first up for our panel, I'd like to go to you, Sam, and if you could perhaps tell us a little bit about your work at CSM, and of course some of the challenges that you've been going through, but also some of the opportunities that you and your team are starting to focus on.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. CSM is a broad service sponsorship agency, so and we are just the little Australian outlet of a more wider global beast, headquartered in London. We've sort of been going here in Australia for sort of 7 or 8 years. I've been here about 4 years. And we work across the 3 streams of rights sales to connecting brands and sponsors and rights holders, and sponsorship management, so looking after those brands and their activations, and then the physical event delivery sort of side, which mainly we focus on a lot of branding and physical branding delivery, which is kind of where my background comes from. And I think that, like everybody, it sort of experienced when this sort of whole situation changed and the pandemic hit, we business basically dropped off a cliff, there were no events coming up. That was sort of part of it. There were the brands that we were working with were retreating into their shells, so that was another part of it. And no one was doing new sponsorship deals because the level of uncertainty was sort of so great. So effectively across the whole sort of 3 sort of streams, we definitely in Australia sort of slowed right down. We were lucky because I think it caught us at the start of winter rather than at the start of summer. So we already had a fairly quiet winter sort of planned, bit of business development, that sort of thing, but we didn't lose a huge amount of planned business in that first sort of few months. The team in the UK, they sort of watched their great big summer of sport get wiped out in the space of a week or so. You know, they would literally, the team there were telling me that they were stepping away from their desks for 5 minutes and coming back. Another 2 events had been cancelled, and sort of that was how they were sort of experiencing it. So yeah, it's in that respect it has been challenging, and I think we're just starting to sort of see a few shoots now of people sort of planning ahead for sort of potentially sort of next year and things like that, and we're sort of starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. But for us, mainly it's been a batten down the hatches, work on some internal processes, keep the team interested and motivated, you know, talking to them. In the early days, there was a lot of the social sort of element, you know, doing the old regular sort of Zoom chats and sort of Friday afternoon drinks and stuff like that. I think as everyone's got in the swing of it, we've sort of, a lot of those things have sort of fallen by the wayside, but it was important when it was also new to us. So yeah, that has been the challenge, and that's sort of where we are currently at. But yeah, as I say, we're hoping to see some improvements, and sort of adapt and sort of survive where we can.
Yeah, no, that's right. And how large is CSM in terms of the people in Australia and across the world, Sam?
Before the pandemic or after?
Yeah, well, that's sorry. That's yes. And when you're in full momentum and full.
So we laid claim going into this to about 25 offices. Across sort of 20 countries or something like that, and about 2,000 employees, I think. In the UK, probably around 700, something like that. Maybe US has probably got 500, and then around in small offices in various places around the world, but a fair few in Dubai and Hong Kong. Down here in Australia, we peaked at about 9-10 of us. At the moment, we're sort of on a fighting fit, sort of 4 or 5 or 6. Yeah. So with a couple of freelancers in there and things like that. So we try and stay flexible. But yeah, definitely not at our peak at this point in time.
No, I don't think any of us are, unfortunately. But has it been, I guess, useful or reassuring to have other colleagues in other parts of the world to connect with during this phase, or and how are we faring comparing to some of those?
Well, obviously during the early phases, it was difficult to avoid being smug, because sitting down here in Australia, watching what was happening in the UK, there was a feeling of, oh, we're all right. Look, this is all quite good. And then obviously this sort of second wave and the way that Australia has dealt with things, I think, means that having locked down very hard the first time, they could only really do as much the second time. And so I think it sort of took the wind out of everybody's sails a little bit. And, very much just before that sort of second wave hit, we were, the likes of Cricket Australia were absolutely coming out of their shells, and they were sort of ready to sort of to get the ball rolling next year's this season's planning, and then they got the rug whipped out from under them again, and so everyone sort of, right, okay, we're all stood down again, or we're taking another few months to think about it. And so yeah, I'm not so smug anymore, I guess. But it has, from a sort of international colleague perspective, it has meant that whereas flat out in the UK, and we would not struggle, but we would sort of have to fight to get their attention or sort of access some of those central services, creative, strategy, etc. There's been more time for that. So where opportunities have popped up, we've been able to sort of wait, and we've actually probably developed better relationships with some of our UK colleagues than we had previously, because they've got more time for us.
Oh, it's good to hear. It's good to hear. And yeah, I think you're quite right. It's hard to predict or be too complacent. Hopefully we can be optimistic about the way we're all heading. But that's interesting, the perspective, the vantage point you've had. I'll definitely obviously come back to you throughout the chat. I'd love to bring Sophie into the conversation this morning. Sophie, loving your setup. We were just admiring your office earlier. It's great to have you on the show. And perhaps can you tell us a little bit about Register Now and, of course, your work there and some of the work you've been doing with your clients through this recent phase?
Yeah, sure. So for those that don't know, Register Now is an online registration provider for sports events. So we don't typically run events. We all come from event backgrounds, but our role is really to provide the technological process for our clients. So, from first registration all the way through to, rolling out event packs and event e-ticketing and that sort of thing. We provide the full sort of tech solution. So, in some ways we're a technology company, and then others we're, really very much in that sports industry because we straddle both sides. We also, in the last couple of years, have added services to our portfolio. So we offer athlete services to our clients, and my role has really been to build out the marketing sort of agency side of the business as well. So I've been with Register Now for about almost a decade now, and about 4 years ago, we really changed the focus to really, look after the mass participation sports industry. So at that same time, I sort of refocused our brand narrative, and, really worked through our, content plan and, framing that for our, our clients and our offering. And, through doing that, I really could see that, a lot of our clients could benefit from going through that same process. So hence, the agency side of the business is born, which we've been heavily involved in over this time. Just to give you an idea of numbers, for Register Now, we have about, pre-COVID, we'd have about 5,000 events across our system each year. We have about 1,000 clients that we look after. Obviously, we don't do the sort of high level of service for all the clients. From the grassroots level, we've got, lots of country events that have like maybe 30 to 40 people in a fun run. And then, to the highest level, City of Surf is one of our biggest clients, and obviously that's one of the biggest fun run in the world. So we really, it's a scalable sort of solution. Since COVID, I mean, as you know, that the announcement on, I believe it was Friday, March 13th, when Scott Morrison came out, and I'm sure Dave is well aware of what happened on that day because he would have seen it, and I'm sure we'll touch on that.
Yeah, definitely.
In that moment, that was really, the kind of the turning point for all of us in this industry. Following that, we had thousands and thousands of events across our system cancel. On top of that, not only were they cancelling, but everyone had a different scenario. Like some people were refunding full amounts, some were refunding 50%. Like it was just everyone had a different situation. So our response, obviously, initially was to help, handle the crisis comms for a lot of our clients. A lot of them just didn't even know what to do, where they stood from a, I guess, a compliance point of view in terms of, refund requirements and that sort of thing. And then, there was the process of actually refunding pretty much close to $4 million in registration fees over the next sort of 6 to 7 weeks after that period. So to say that was a hectic time would be an understatement, especially, considering that we also everyone had to do it from home. We had our 3 kids, that were homeschooling as well. So certainly it has been a challenge and an extraordinary learning experience. In terms of, how we've helped our clients, I mean, I think we'll touch on that a bit more later on. But we have, some really high touch clients that we handle their social media for and all their sort of, email and digital comms. So, we really had to sort of look after our own comms as well as their comms. So it was a really interesting time, and I think it was good because, we saw very quickly what worked and what didn't. And, the biggest learning was, absolutely do not go dark. You need to be completely transparent the whole way through.
Yeah.
And that was something that we just kept telling all our clients as well. Like you can't just ignore this. Like it is happening. There's no rule book for this, but you need to go out and tell, even if you don't know if you're postponing or when you might be, scheduling your event, you need to be upfront because, at the end of the day, participants are the core of an event. They just live and breathe the event. And if you lose that sort of reputation with them, then you're going to suffer a lot more down the track.
Interesting. Yeah. And I bet you've learnt a lot. There's been a lot of lessons, I guess, out of this phase when we're in difficult circumstances. Sometimes the real learnings come out, don't they? I guess before we go to Dave, I'd be interested just in a couple of your thoughts on the principles or the strategies that you've followed to the top line. You mentioned there is, I suppose, no playbook or no rule book for this situation, but I know you've been advising clients certain principles or things to have front of mind as they're going through the comms, whether that be about crisis and refunds or whether they're trying to stay engaged with their participants.
Yeah, so look, I think, as event organisers, an event, in terms of being a PR exercise, it is like the ultimate risk management, experience, right? So, we all should have a plan. Like, obviously you don't have a pandemic in your plan, but, most event organisers would have a whiteboard out the back with a bit of a decision tree of, if this happens, then we need to do this, and, a flow and effect of all the different scenarios. And I think in the past, people have been quite cagey and, this has been sort of a, for your eyes only. What we have learned through helping some of our clients and especially, even the bushfires as well, like even if you don't know where things are going to end up, you need to communicate the whole way through just to sort of manage, issue management in the first instance. And then, that's going to protect the reputation down the line, because if you've been open and upfront and, let people rant on social media, they will do it. But if you're providing that information along the journey, then, you can't be faulted, because, you're sharing what you know. And, we're all people, event organisers are not like this, special, unique kind of person. Like they only can, work at the mercy of, the other, the health department or the police or, whoever the stakeholders are that are, ultimately, making the call. It's not really, the event organisers often gets, sort of put in this linchpin situation, but they don't make the final call, really. So yeah. I think just being upfront along the way is really important. Don't go dark. Don't hide comments as well, because everyone can see if someone's trolling, everyone will see that, they're the one in the wrong, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, they're definitely good things to have front of mind. I think it's, and no doubt there's been some difficult conversations and communications. It doesn't feel great when you're in it, but I think that's good advice in terms of be open and honest and keep communicating. That's important, isn't it? And do as much as you can. We don't control everything as much as we like to think we can.
And we're all human. I think if you can show that humanity, the participants that have empathy and can see that will respect it, and it'll pay off later, because we will come through this. And the interesting thing about this huge global health crisis is it's really amplified those organisations that can handle things well, and it also amplifies those that don't handle things well. So I think people remember that, beyond all this, they'll remember who came out and, communicated well and was clear, concise, consistent, and that will be remembered, and it will add that sort of reputational brand value that, you can't buy that, you can't sort of regain that either. How you behave now will, impact the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great message, isn't it? I think those relationships, and people will remember how you treated them, how you made them feel, whether that's clients or participants or whoever the customer or whoever the relationships with. So that's a really good call out. Thanks, Sophia. And Dave, I'll come to you now. And I guess Sophie's mentioned the infamous date where you were one of many that were, I guess, thrown into the fire as such, not through anyone's fault, but the circumstances that emerged. And perhaps you can give us a little bit of a rundown of your role as site manager at the Australian Grand Prix, and perhaps some of the experiences you had in those weeks following.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And Sophie's touched on some really good points there that I'm sure we'll touch on later. As you mentioned, for those of you who don't know, I'm the assistant project director and senior site manager on the Formula One project. I work for APP, who are a consulting business in property and infrastructure. And one of their projects is obviously the engineering project management services for the Formula One for our client, the Australian Grand Prix Corporation. Project involves, I guess, us, APP, having full responsibility for transforming Albert Park into a Formula One racing circuit and then turning it back into a park and all the associated infrastructure that goes with that, grandstands, media, facilities, corporate, and everything else, whilst managing, I guess, the risk and safety for over, I think it's more than 60 contractors we've got. And this year we had just over 3,000 contractors inducted on the project. So it's I guess it's in a, as said, in a public park with major arterial roads going through it and around it. So that's it keeps us on our toes. So my role, I guess some of the things I'm responsible for are day-to-day management of parks stakeholders, as well as superintending contractors and ensuring the build schedule is met. I spent probably about 8 to 9 months of the year in Albert Park itself working on the project, as I'm predominantly responsible for the dealings with Parks Victoria as well as the landowners.
Yeah.
As for the Friday the 13th, I think we probably all remember where we were at that moment in time when the announcement got made about event cancellations everywhere. And I think for us, it was probably a culmination of a challenging event build throughout, with all the hazardous air quality that we've had with the bushfires and unexpected rainfall that then came with it that had some impacts on the build. And there was a new World Tour Melbourne concert series that threw some challenges in there. We had combined closures and road closures and major event in the park with the ICC T20 Cricket World Cup for the women. So the Friday the 13th, I guess when that announcement came, there was a lot of contractors and ourselves walking around kind of unsure of what had just happened. There were quite a lot of tears, not just myself, but many other suppliers realizing that what had just happened to them and what would be happening. And I think within a few days, obviously, a lot of the contractors and suppliers had let go of a lot of their staff because there was no business coming up. JobKeeper wasn't around at that moment in time. So it was, for us, it was working very closely with all of our contractors to see how we could assist them and keep everyone working for as long as possible with as many staff as possible. But if you go back to those first minutes where after the announcement we made, literally, obviously there were certain stakeholders that knew about it with Formula One, and they literally had all right, we need to get out of here as soon as possible so that we can get back home and back to Europe and before borders close or whatever might happen. So as soon as that announcement had been made, there was a literal quick flick of the switch, and we were straight into dismantle mode, and all the considerations that came with that. Obviously, being what would normally have been an event day, there weren't all the contractors that we would normally have on site for a dismantle day, so lots of changes had to be made, phone calls had to be made. But I guess that's what we do. We, as event people, we change and adapt and make things work. Our dismantle, normally takes about 5 weeks, and due to everything, contractors standing down their staff, it took up to 12 weeks this year, which was only possible due to collaboration with stakeholders. The fact that, I guess, that in Albert Park, which is a public park, local sporting clubs weren't coming back because local sport was cancelled. So, and during that whole process, I guess we were working to a COVID safe plan that probably had never existed as yet, had never even been mentioned, no word of that had existed. So we were making these changes based on any government updates at the time. So meetings initially were held outside, socially distanced, apart where possible. I would say hand sanitizer, as everyone knows, was everywhere at that moment in time. But again, additional toilets were kept on site longer, extra cleaning regimes. Yeah, there was a lot done at the time, but it actually seemed like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah, you've probably lived a bit in the last few months, Dave. I'd be really interested. I mean, I certainly appreciate how large that build is. I mean, it's effectively a city, which is or a small town that's established over a period of time, as you say, and knowing Albert Park, the transformation that it goes under, and you know, the amount of moving parts and people that are involved both with the event and stakeholders around it. It's an immense project. So I'm keen, I suppose, to ask you a bit more about what was sort of going through your mind, or what some of the mindsets that you had through that phase, but also generally. What was it, sort of a heightening of some of the skills that you had developed over the years in terms of communication and collaboration and understanding that, you know, the knock-on effects of things? Or was there a lot of different things that you needed to do in your day-to-day work in that phase?
Yeah, I think there were so many unknowns, and I think there still are. And I think that at the time, no one really knew what was going to happen from one day to the next, and it was all new. And I think, as Soph said, that every event and organizer and contractor and stakeholder, they've all got their plans for if something goes wrong, but none of us had ever planned for a global pandemic. And I think the way that changed and the way we had to take on board government restrictions, that definitely kept us on our toes. But we made those changes, and whether it was, and we managed to get government approval to keep the park locked down for an additional few days, which meant changing government acts and everything else, and that meant that our contractors could work in a safer environment without the public coming in for a few extra days to get lots of the major stuff out of the park. But yeah, it was it definitely had its challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I imagine there's lots of things which you're then able to apply now to planning for future events, and I guess understanding as Sophie said, there was no sort of real playbook, although there's a general playbook for events that you know, we need to manage risks and plan for things and create contingencies and what have you. But is there a lot that you've built into and managed to change in terms of how you approach next year and in future years?
Yeah, yes and no.
Yep.
We're obviously, because it is ever changing. So like every year, we work closely with the Australian Grand Prix Corporation to determine the overlay of the event, because that's what we look after, and we're working again very closely with what the event will look like for 2021. But as we're having to take in, we're reviewing federal, state, local, international, national stakeholder considerations, as well as our supplier needs with everything related to COVID-19. And some of these items, I guess, could be major, but in other cases, it could be a few additional fence lines to designate works areas, which then means that contractors can work safely and unobscured, but also doesn't mean that toilets that have normally only had cold water now need hot water connections, because hot water is the best way with soap to wash your hands. We've had multiple contractors in previous years work in certain works areas, finalising facilities, but is that now going to be possible under current restrictions or under the next stage of restrictions once they're loosened? Therefore, do we require more build timelines and everything else? So as a team, we're in the process of gathering all that information and putting it all together. And I guess it's keeping everyone's needs, not only our clients, our own, but also our stakeholders and suppliers. And just, I guess, at a certain point, at whatever stage of restrictions we're at, we'll roll out what we can and what we're allowed to.
No, that's good. Good to hear how you've absorbed what you've learned and how much you can apply, and how much you're still, I suppose, understanding and evolving the way it is that we need to work. So I might come back to Sam now, and Dave, I know you've got other duties this morning as well. So if you disappear, we'll know you'll come back. And
I'll be back in 2 seconds. Thanks.
And there are a couple of questions popping through, so thank you, and we'll get to those shortly. But Sam, I'm interested in similar theme to, I suppose, what Sophie and Dave have spoken about. What's the lessons? It's a bit of a broad question, but the lessons that you've taken on board yourself and with your team, and what you are doing differently potentially with your clients, and are the clients starting to come back, and are the conversations emerging, and what's the outlook for you for the next couple of months?
Yeah, I think in terms of what we're doing differently, or what lessons we've learned, there's definitely things in what Sophie and Dave said that sort of that resonated. I think from a communication with our clients' point of view, one of the key things has been this open, honest, collaborative, and very human approach. Because ultimately, it's one of the things that I've sort of seen coming through this sort of whole this whole experience, is that people have been more open, with in doing things like this, sort of like zooming into everybody's houses, etc. We've all had to open the doors on our lives a little bit, and so having to nip off to keep an eye on the kids, being stuck in the sort of the kids' playroom, and sort of all of that sort of stuff that just happens to us now, and so I think we've all become more human to each other and to our clients as well. So that's been an interesting, and I think unanticipated sort of consequence of the whole thing, even down to sort of, I see one of the questions coming through for Dave about the sort of the mental health impact on sort of people. We are all open to talking about these things now, sort of like, how has this hurt you? How has it helped you? How has it, how have you coped? And I think that's a big thing. And so we have our approach to our clients, those that are looking to either that cancelled at the time or that are looking to come back in the next sort of few months, is very much, we're here to help you, sort of, we're open and sort of available to collaborate with you. Ultimately, we all want the same result. We all want events to be back on track. We all want, a colleague of mine said, we are in the business of bringing people together, and that's the thing that we've been told we can't do. So it's in all of our interests to get that happening again. And for that reason, I think, again, like Sir Dave was saying, they're currently collating all this information. We're saying it's very open, it's very collaborative. As we find out information, if we share it with our clients, if we're doing something for a client in the UK, we're taking that template and we're saying, hey guys, see this template? This is how we're operating for them. Would that help you? I hope to God that rights holders, I think some are doing better than others, but that they're talking to each other, that, sort of cricket are learning from AFL, who are talking to NRL, who are, I hope all these guys are sort of really sharing best practice, because we're all learning as we go. That's all we can do at this sort of time. I think that's where we're changing things up a little bit. It's we're not looking quite in the same way to monetize our expertise, I suppose. It's more sort of saying, we're here for you, if we can do something, that's great. Let's all help everybody get back on track.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's really, really good to hear. And I think it would be good to hear Dave's thoughts as well on I guess, the human impact, as you put it, Sam. And Dave, I know you're at the hub of many suppliers. You're speaking to many across our industry. Well, there's a question here from Hannah Bailey talking about or asking about the mental health impact on suppliers and crew that I guess went through that phase and that situation. But I know that there's that situation's really across all of our industry now. So, Dave, I suppose the question for you: what have you sort of seen or heard from the conversations you're having with our suppliers across our network, and how they're feeling about things, how they're coping with things?
Yeah, it's from various discussions I've had, it appears that I think the biggest thing for everyone in the events industry, and I guess like most aspects of our life that we've touched on, it's the unknowns. When will events return? Major events, participation events, the register and I were involved with, and when can staff return? I think most of our suppliers and discussions and contractors and people that we talk to, all their staff are all ready to jump back as soon as someone says go. That everyone's chomping at the bit to get started again. And I think what we've been doing as a team is we've been as an overall APP team, we've been speaking to our contractors and our partners and stakeholders regularly, because I think every time we chat to them, everyone seems to open up and they're happy to hear that from someone. And I think everyone does feel a little bit down, and everyone's just looking for that answer, looking for someone to stand up and say, yes, this is when things are returning. And it's just, everyone needs that little bit of positivity to come out of it. And I hope people can hang in there that little bit longer, and hopefully we get some kind of positive news from the government this weekend on what the next steps will be, so that everyone can start planning to see where we're going. As for, I guess, the mental health aspect, as per Hannah's question, during the dismantle, I think, speaking from our team perspective, I think because we were so busy during that period, I think lockdown 1.0 kind of passed us by as such. And I think it's that secondary phase, and we're a very small team. Throughout the year, there's 8-9 of us work on a project all year round, and we're very close. We normally sit close together, which obviously not doing anymore. We all bounce our ideas off each other, and that's something that we can't do. So there's a lot of Zoom chats, a lot of phone calls to check in on people and see how they're doing. And I think that's the most important thing. Keep checking in with people. Call your stakeholders, call your suppliers, your event organizer, your colleagues. Just keep checking and see how they're doing. Have a chat to them. It's very much appreciated when we've been doing it.
Yeah, that's what it comes back to, isn't it? That's good advice. Yeah. Thanks, Dave, and appreciate you sharing, I guess, your perspective on it all. And Sophie, I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of what you're hearing and talking about, both with your clients, and I guess you're connected with many other providers in our industry. Some of the conversations you're having, and also with the customer, the participant, the fan. What's the communication like around that at the moment?
Yeah, well, look, I really liked what Sam was saying about that whole collaboration piece. And we've really, through all of this, we've really seen the industry just come together, particularly with the formation of AMPSIA, which is like a governing group to represent the mass participation industry, and they're lobbying to government at the moment. And there's a number of really, key people involved in that. And that's been really tremendous for, giving the mass participation industry a voice. But even prior to that starting, we have been collaborating so much more with, other partners in the industry. And I mean, we're really lucky at Register now. We're kind of the Switzerland of our industry, because we work with so many different event clients in a sense. So we're encouraging them all to speak. I mean, we've started a new EDM, which is all about news and good stories in the industry, and really just, obviously we're not updating our platform or, announcing new events too much, but we do have some updates coming, but that's not the key focus, because it's not about the product at the moment. It's just about sharing what other people are doing. There's events are starting. We've had a few COVID safe events rolling out over the last few weeks. So really sharing those stories. We've also been collaborating a lot with international providers as well. I feel like this whole time has really, it's brought globally our industry so much more together as well, which has been really fantastic. From a Register Now point of view, we've been putting together lots of guides and, practical things that event organisers can do and follow to keep, their participants engaged during this time. Potentially, they're obviously like the optics on the social plan that you had previously is not going to be the same. It needs to all be put through a COVID lens now. You're not talking about an event coming up in 3 weeks or, 7 days or what have you. That's all had to be put on hold. But, the fortunate thing about events is they have just this ultimate library of content of past, event photos, and they've also got participants that participate in events absolutely passionate, particularly your, event evangelists. So there's never been a time when it has been more important to really engage those people. Like if you went and had a look through all the people that tag your, event hashtag or social media handles, there's just a huge amount of content there, and this is the time to be sharing that. You can't have better ambassadors for your events than participants that go in them. So I think now is the time to be sharing that. We don't want to just go quiet. We want to continue that conversation, keep collaborating, and I think the industry as a whole will do so much better from this time as well. It's not about our event. It's everyone wants to see events come back, and we're all we all need to cheer for that and get on board, I think.
Absolutely. Are you finding that the customer is looking for quite different content or interaction at the moment, and the different types of customers? And you mentioned some of the evangelists, those that are real fans of your event are going to want to stay connected, but yet some are obviously going to drift off during this period, and then some perhaps are alienated by what's gone on. So I guess what's your advice in terms of managing those different relationships you've got with your customers?
Yeah, look, so I mean, on the clients that we look after their sort of socials for, we've found rather than just, we've had to, realign the content pillars, and rather than, talking about the event that's coming up, it's more just like, where the event is held and, just those sort of hero finish line images and just reminders. And, we're not going out every, like every second day. It's, just the odd reminder, because as soon as you stop, posting, then that, that engagement really dies off, and it takes a while to warm up, as it is, only 5% of your followers see your posts anyway. So to keep that organic, following is tough. But I guess, in terms of like the broader sort of Register Now and users and clients, we've tried to, it is hard. Like a lot of people have gone offline, but, it's important to keep just putting it out there and keep the good stories flowing. People do have different needs, and, it's not going to be for everyone right now. And also it's not just about like, consistency in one area. It's about being consistent across all platforms as well, because everyone likes to consume content differently as well. So what someone might like to see in an email, others might like to see on a website or on social media. So it's really about ensuring that you have a consistent message and you stick to the plan. It's with content strategies, it's all about the long game, really. Like it's not going to be a short-term solution.
That's great advice, Sophie. There's a question here around the communication around the Grand Prix as it unfolded and what impact it might have on the brand long term. And Sophie, it's up to you if you want to sort of critique the Grand Prix approach. I think at least it'd be interesting to know your learnings in terms of we would have seen many events, as you said, cancelled or postponed at least. There's some things that some lessons that we can use if we're facing that situation or in the future in terms of how to approach that.
Yeah. Oh, look, that was, I felt so much for the team, in that moment, they had all the people waiting at the, to come in, and, it wasn't really up to them at all, like Dave touched on, so many stakeholders, obviously waiting on a message from Europe as well to be able to go out and make the call. So, look, I think the team handled it as well as they could have. And, I've seen later on there was there was a video clip I saw it on some platform, and it really went to the story and told the story, and it gave that sort of backstory as to why things unfolded in that way. And look, that I think anyone that can have a bit of empathy and regard the situation in that respect. I mean, it was totally out of the hands of the organisers in a sense. So look, I don't think the long-term damage will be like too severe. I think unfortunately it was the first of many of these scenarios. So and being such a public national global event, it was really unfortunate. But it'll be interesting to see how things are supported next year. But yeah, look, personally, I think guys did as best they could in the scenario, which is really unfortunate. At the end of the day, it was up to the Prime Minister of Australia. So
that's right. That's right. Best of a difficult situation, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sam, I'd love to chat to you a bit more. And Sophie just mentioned, I suppose, some of the lobbying or some of the industry networks which are being established, AMC for the mass participation space. We've seen the live entertainment. There's a few great initiatives which have emerged. As a MD of a large company in our space and someone who's I guess got an international vantage point. I know we spoke the other day a little bit about this, but do you think we need more support in our industry? Do we need to be doing more? Are we doing enough? What's your take on that?
I think I have to say, I wouldn't have put myself as the biggest fan of Australian sort of political sort of situation prior to this, but I've got to say it's been handled well. It feels to me like it's been handled pretty well. Maybe that's a New South Wales perspective. Victorians might have a different sort of approach, but the support that is in place in terms of JobKeeper and stuff like that has been well managed, well rolled out. Okay, they're all learning as they go, so there have been a few false starts and stuff like that, but in the kind of realms of as good as it can possibly be, I think it's done well. It's a lot more simple than what they're going through in the UK, which is complicated as all hell, and furloughing and a lot of people on furlough, off furlough. It's like, it's a mess. And generally, we've been communicated with up front. We've been told that things are extending. So that element in terms of the overall government support for all industry and for the economy as a whole, I think has been pretty decent. And I think that has possibly left, this is one of the reasons that we've maybe been slower to mobilise than sort of some of the other countries. Sort of, things have got to the point in the UK where people are, out on the sort of streets protesting, or the event industry has been holding awareness events, and I think that's now spread across to the US, and they light up all the buildings red, and there's a hashtag of we make events or something like that. And it's really, and the issue is that people see the top line. They see the rights holders who are not holding their event. They see the actors who can't sort of go sort of play in a playhouse, the theatres that are closing down, etc. But they don't see the lighting technicians, the overlay guys, the visual effects, the the branding suppliers, and so on and so forth. The project managers that sit behind the scenes, and that is, I think, where the industry is starting to feel a pinch quite significantly. Can we do more? I mean, without just going, cap in hand to the sort of to the powers that be. We can't break the rules. We can't, people are doing what they can to start bringing events back. I was impressed by the speed at which sport came back. I think that required a few sports to push quite hard and to sort of challenge what they were being told. But so we're involved in the UK in the planning for biosecure venues. So, for example, the cricket has been held within a bubble. They sort of have external security, and then media can come into this zone, and then the players come into this zone, and there's a few other sort of events that are looking at running those similar sort of strategies. I think the events, the big sports all went, we can't be off for a long time. It's just, it's not viable. What now is the problem is that they're doing that in quite contained ways, and all the people that rely on the fan participation and the mass participation, that's where the real struggle is. And similarly to that, the brands who need security, and like we were talking about the uncertainty earlier, brands need certainty in order to invest money, and they're not seeing that certainty. They don't know how an event is going to be delivered next year. They don't know how many people are going to be there. They don't know what the schedule might be. Could it all get cancelled at a minute's notice? And it's only that sort of certainty coming back into the industry which is going to allow us to sort of really get things rolling again. But as far as, as Sophie said, some events are starting to come back in sort of, restricted ways. Participation is sort of growing. I think the first triathlon there's a triathlon taking place in the next sort of few weeks. People are looking at next year. I guess the message for me to event owners and to the brands that would support them is the people haven't gone away. They're still there. The participants, the fans, the passionate sort of supporters of both clubs and sports and participants in events, etc. They're all there. They're all just like us. They're sitting at home twiddling their thumbs, kind of, desperate to get back out there. So when it happens, it's not like we're going to be starting building from zero. They're there and they're ready to go. So I think somebody needs to sometimes take a bit of a plunge. And again, the NRL sort of don't always get things right, but the way they pushed the industry to say, we want to get back going, ended up with pushing everybody along. Otherwise we all could be sitting there sort of kind of, well, do we, don't we? And so I think it needs a few brave events to say, yeah, we can do this. And a few brave sponsors to say, we're going to put the money behind it. So.
Great call out. I think we all appreciate the power of a deadline in events, and the NRL certainly did that very well, didn't they? They set a date, and it was a real call to action. So I completely agree with you. I think the more that we can be, we're not short on being proactive, but have some things to work towards and going for it, then that's be great. A great sentiment to kick back in. There's a very quick question for you here, Sam, from Lisa Hunt. Do you think the Olympics will go ahead next year? And if they do, what will be the impacts on sponsors and sponsors' activations and hospitality? I guess the spend or willingness to invest in that. What's your quick take on that? Big question.
Personally, I think the Olympics will go ahead because obviously they didn't have enough time to change their planning for the original date. At this point in time, my expectation is that they are planning for all contingencies. So they can't afford the Olympics not to happen from a global sporting point of view, from a broadcast point of view, from a sponsorship point of view. So it will, I believe it will go ahead, but they will be planning for a whole bunch of different scenarios, from sort of slightly reduced to certain, fan participation or not, sort of, and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know exactly in what form, but I'm pretty convinced it will go ahead. The powers that move sport are pretty powerful when they have the time to do it, and the money is there. But I must admit, we always felt a little bit. I always, working in sport, I went, sport's one of those things that, no matter what happens, so like everyone will always want sports. Live sport is untouchable. It's great to be in such a recession-proof industry. Oh yeah, pandemics. Didn't think of that.
No, we missed that one, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
Not in the risk management plan.
No, it
That's
wasn't.
Right. That's right. But fair to say it is now, though, very much. So, Look, I'm conscious we're actually coming almost towards the end of the hour, so I'll like to obviously go back to each of you for a final thought, observation, or sort of priorities for you and your teams over the coming weeks and months. Dave, perhaps if I can come back to you first and get your thoughts in terms of something that you think we should be thinking about as we walk away and get on with our event lives.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, 1 second.
Guest appearance. That's all right. We'll go to Sophie. Would you like to give us your thoughts before you have any guest appearances yourself?
Yeah, no, I've locked myself in here. But yeah, no, look, I think, we hope and we know events will eventually come back. And when they do, I mean, sadly, I think there'll be a lot of clients of ours that probably won't survive this. The smaller clients. It's just a reality of what's happened. But, for those that have, it's going to be really competitive, and I think the most important thing for clients to consider, as they sort of move forward is, those core pillars of being transparent, consistent, having a plan and sticking to it and being really upfront about it from the get-go. If an event is going to be postponed, do you have a virtual option? And making sure that, comms are clear and consistent from the get-go, and not just clear messaging, consistent messaging, actually considering who is it for. I see Seth Godin in the background. That's part of his, philosophy is like, who is it for? Like, who is this message for? And making sure that, everything that you're doing, you're considering, if you were that event participant, would you be happy being served this email or this post? I think that, that level of empathy really makes a real difference. And, as Sam also touched on, like we've now sort of reached this new personal level. So let's leverage that and make the most of it, because when events come back, it is going to be highly competitive. So, things like, how you've communicated, how you continue to communicate, and that brand reputation is going to be, so important. It's going to be, it's going to be like, the absolute pillar of everything that we do.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be my final sort of comment on it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Bang on. I agree 100%. I think it's a really, really good call out. Thank you, Sophie. And Dave, I'll come back to you in terms of your final thoughts and things to take away with.
Yeah, things to take away. I think at the moment, personally, I'm trying to enjoy the most of this situation, where it's not too often that, I guess, as events people, we do get to spend time at home with their kids and family, and it's nice to see them grow and learn, and watch my oldest one, who's 7, do her schoolwork and see what she's doing. And so from that's a nice side aspect to this part of what we're doing. From a work perspective, I guess Sophie touched on a lot of it. I think it's going to have to be very clear communication to everyone what plans are. There's going to be lots of sharing of information, because ultimately, I spoke to a contractor about it yesterday, no matter what, I guess, gets mentioned or what we're looking to do, everyone more than ever is looking to keep their staff safe. Everyone wants to make sure that their staff and their contractors or their people don't go home with some form of this pandemic or something. So that's definitely one. And as per, I think, Hannah's question, I think mental health and how we all deal with that it's probably going to be hard for some people to eventually go back as well. So that will have to be managed. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of challenges ahead, but I think like all good events people, we can definitely make them happen.
Absolutely, Dave. That's right. And focus on what's important. That's
Correct.
very good points. And Sam, I'd love to have your final thoughts or priorities for you guys in the coming weeks.
I suppose if a takeaway point would simply be, we as events people have, clearly we're learning things out of this all the time, in the spirit of this new open collaborative sort of approach. To anybody that's got an event that's a rights holder or brands that are looking to sort of to work into this space, just reach out, talk to people, sort of, get in touch. You're not going to get slapped with a bill just because you talk to somebody. And I think that's where we're all, as I said, we're all pulling towards a sort of central goal, and we're learning as we go, and that's very much how we want to help the industry. The industry's success is then reflected in the success of all the suppliers that feed into it. So that's all we can all we can do is sort of try and help.
That's fantastic. Great message to finish up on, Sam, and really appreciated all your perspectives today. You're all doing some great work, and I know there's many people and suppliers, providers, agencies across our industry which are doing the best they can, and I'm sure we'll be back doing amazing work now and very soon. So but thank you to our panel today for giving up their valuable time and sharing their extremely valuable thoughts. So thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Dave. Really appreciate you all sharing your wisdom with us today and honest thoughts. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for including
Thanks,
me.
Andrew. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Fantastic. And thank you to everyone who joined us. Really appreciate you supporting the show. Really do hope that you've walked away with some things that you can use in your lives. Please do keep following the show if you can. We'll be back in 3 weeks with the live show. We're lining up another great panel of people like us to share our thoughts. If I can help in any way, please reach out at any time. I'm sure each of the panelists today would love to hear from you as well. There's a lot of things on my website which you can explore if you wish. The event shows, this show will be posted live today, later today at least. So if you'd like to share that with anyone you think might find it valuable, please do so. There's a podcast version of the shows where we speak to other people across our industry. And I'm obviously out doing different work, which you can explore some more on the website and download some of the resources which are freely available. So thank you all again for joining us. Thanks again to Sam, Sophie, and Dave. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wipe away.
Bye.
Good wave. Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Bye.